The vastness of space held secrets beyond imagination, and for centuries, humanity had been nothing more than a mere speck in the infinite dark. But that was before the Vorkath arrived. They were known throughout the galaxy as the most feared warriors, a race whose name struck terror into the hearts of even the bravest of species. Their empire had conquered countless worlds, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. They were unstoppable, a force of nature, and they had set their eyes on Earth. It was an ordinary day when Earth first detected the incoming fleet. The global defense system, which had been designed to protect against potential threats, suddenly blared to life. At first, no one thought much of it. There had been false alarms before, moments of panic that turned out to be nothing more than space debris or an asteroid passing too close to the atmosphere. But this time, something felt different. The sensors picked up an anomaly. A ship unlike anything humanity had ever seen before. It was massive, its shape too perfect, too sleek, to belong to any known species. Around the world, military commanders, scientists, and engineers scrambled to analyze the data. As the minutes ticked by, the enormity of the situation began to sink in. The ship wasn't just large, it was enormous, easily the size of a small moon. And it wasn't coming to orbit Earth. No, it was headed directly toward the planet, its trajectory unmistakably clear. This wasn't a chance encounter. This was an invasion. People across the globe watched the skies in growing panic as the ship drew closer. Governments scrambled to prepare for what was to come. Earth's United Defense Forces, a coalition of the world's best and brightest military minds, began coordinating their response. They had never faced an enemy like this. Their weapons were strong, but there was no way to know how they would stand against a force with technology beyond human comprehension. As the alien ship came into view, a ripple of fear spread across the planet. News broadcasts began to show live footage of the object as it cut through the atmosphere, its massive form casting a shadow over entire cities. The first wave of humanity's countermeasures was launched, a fleet of fighter jets and warships. Yet they were nothing more than ants compared to the towering alien vessel. But no one expected them to win. The mere fact that they were launching a counterattack felt like a statement. Humanity would not go down without a fight. For hours, the world held its breath. And then, something even more terrifying happened. Another ship appeared, then another, then dozens more. It was as if they were simply coming out of nowhere, one after another, until the sky above Earth was filled with massive ships, each one more intimidating than the last. The alien fleet was unlike anything seen in history. They were too precise, too organized. The ships moved in unison, like a school of fish in perfect formation. Each ship seemed to communicate silently with the others, their movements calculated and terrifying. The leaders of Earth's united forces gathered in an emergency meeting, trying to make sense of the situation. How had these ships arrived so suddenly? How had they bypassed Earth's defenses without any warning? Was this a fluke, or had humanity been intentionally left unaware of the threat? The questions piled up, but one thing was clear. Earth was about to face its greatest challenge. In a dark war room, a group of experts pored over the data. The ships, though of unimaginable size, did not appear to be attacking yet. They had simply come to a halt, hovering above Earth like silent giants. For hours, nothing happened. It was as if they were waiting for something. The tension grew unbearable. Then, just as humanity began to wonder if they had been given a moment of false hope, the alien ships began to move again. But this time, they didn't come in fast. They moved slowly, deliberately, as if making a statement. Their course was set. They were headed toward Earth's major cities, their paths leaving no room for doubt. This was not a peaceful arrival. On the ground, humanity's defenses were being readied. Fighters were launched into the sky, and defense satellites were aimed at the incoming ships. But as the alien ships neared, Earth's weapons systems began to malfunction. Something about the ship's presence was interfering with every defense humanity had put in place. The advanced weapons technology, once considered the pinnacle of human achievement, seemed powerless against the alien vessels. The world watched in stunned silence as the alien ships began their descent, each one positioning itself over a different city. The global panic reached its peak. Was this the end? Could humanity survive an invasion from such a powerful force? Then the unexpected happened. A transmission came through. It wasn't a warning or a threat. It was a simple message, broadcasted in every language humanity spoke. The words were chilling in their simplicity. You have been judged. Prepare for your fate. The voice that echoed through the communication systems was not robotic, nor was it alien in tone. It was deep, with a calm authority that made the hairs on the back of everyone's neck stand up. The message was clear. These beings were not here to negotiate, nor to conquer with brute force. No, they were here to judge. The transmission sent shockwaves throughout the planet. The entire world was now united in a single question. Who were these aliens? Why had they come? And more importantly, what did they mean by prepare for your fate? For the first time in history, humanity realized it was dealing with something far beyond their comprehension. These weren't just invaders looking to enslave or destroy. They were something more ancient, more powerful, beings who viewed Earth not as a prize to be claimed, but as a species to be judged, evaluated, and assessed. No one had ever prepared for this kind of encounter. As the ships hovered above Earth's cities, their power continued to disrupt all human technology. Communications broke down, lights flickered and went out, and the world was plunged into a strange, eerie quiet. The usual hustle of Earth's bustling cities became silent, as if the entire planet was holding its breath, waiting for something. But the world's greatest minds had not been idle. The best scientists, engineers, and strategists began scrambling to find answers. Was there a way to communicate with these beings? Could Earth resist the judgment that was coming? And if not, what would be the fate of the human race? At the same time, many around the world had one simple thought. Who were these aliens to judge humanity? This sudden invasion, this display of superiority, stirred a feeling of defiance in the hearts of people everywhere. Earth had survived countless threats before, and now they were facing one that was beyond anything they had ever imagined. But the fire of hope and determination was not extinguished. Humanity's resolve to fight, to stand tall, and face the unknown was just beginning to take shape. No one knew what would happen next, but one thing was certain. Earth's fight for survival had just begun. The question of whether humanity could survive was no longer in the hands of its leaders. It rested in the hearts of every human being on the planet. The Vorkath had come to judge, but humanity would show them that they were not so easily judged or conquered. The battle for Earth's future had just begun, and the galaxy would soon learn the power of a species that would never back down. The Vorkath fleet hovered in the sky, an intimidating presence that blocked out the sun, casting long shadows over the Earth below. The world was still, unnaturally so, as the inhabitants of the planet waited for the next move. The aliens had arrived with such authority, such power, that humanity's first instinct was to submit, to bow before these mighty invaders. But something stirred deep within the hearts of Earth's people. A defiance, born from centuries of survival, began to grow. The message sent by the Vorkath had been simple but terrifying. Prepare for your fate. But what did that mean? Was Earth to be wiped from the galaxy's records? Were the inhabitants to be annihilated? Or was there something else at play? The fear in the air was palpable, but in the silence that followed, there was also a strange sense of solidarity. People, no matter their background, culture, or status, looked to their leaders and each other for answers. And in the most unexpected way, the crisis united humanity more than anything else had ever done. In the command centers across the globe, military leaders and scientists worked frantically to understand the situation. The Vorkath had not yet attacked. They had merely arrived, disrupted the planet's communications, and sent their chilling message. What could this mean? Why had they come without a clear intention to conquer? Was Earth part of a greater galactic struggle? Or were the Vorkath here for something else entirely? As the hours passed, it became clear that Earth had no choice but to prepare for the worst. Leaders across the globe called for calm, urging citizens to remain in their homes as they awaited further instructions. Military forces continued to move into position, hoping to defend Earth should the need arise. And still, the Vorkath fleet remained, silent and imposing. Then, without warning, a transmission broke the silence. This time, it wasn't just a message of judgment. It was a broadcast, a hologram that appeared in every major city across the planet. The figure that appeared was humanoid, but not quite human. It was taller than a human by a good 3 feet, its skin an unnatural shade of pale gray, and its eyes, huge, black, and seemingly endless, gave off an eerie cold light. This being, speaking in a language that was somehow understood by everyone on Earth, gave a name. Voksh, the leader of the Vorkath. "We have come to offer you a choice," the figure said, its voice resonating in every corner of the Earth. "You will bow to our power, or we will erase you from existence. We have seen many worlds fall before us, and we will see yours fall as well, unless you understand the terms of our judgment." The message was clear, but so were the questions it left behind. The Vorkath weren't here to simply wipe Earth from the galaxy. They were offering a choice. What kind of choice? To kneel before them, to accept their rule. Humanity had never encountered such a proposition before. Every invasion in history had come with the threat of death and destruction. But this was different. There was something calculating, almost detached, in the Vorkath's tone. As the hologram faded, panic spread across the world. The leaders of Earth's nations met in secret, discussing how best to respond to this chilling offer. Some suggested immediate surrender, hoping to save lives and avoid conflict. Others argued that to submit would be to allow the Vorkath to decide humanity's fate without a fight. A third faction insisted on striking back immediately, to show the Vorkath that Earth would not roll over so easily. In the midst of the chaos, an unlikely hero emerged. It wasn't a military commander, nor a scientist with a breakthrough idea. It was a young engineer named Julia Voss. Working in a small lab in a quiet city, she had been monitoring the disruptions caused by the Vorkath's arrival. The strange energy signature they had detected earlier wasn't just an anomaly. It was a pattern, something familiar, and with a little more analysis, she realized it wasn't just a random fluctuation in Earth's systems. It was a weakness in their technology. Julia had worked with electromagnetic fields before, but she had never seen anything like this. The Vorkath ships were sending out a powerful energy field that interfered with Earth's technology, disabling their weapons and communication systems. But Julia knew that if she could reverse the polarity of the field or create a counter-frequency, she might be able to disrupt the alien fleet systems, even just for a short time. She contacted a few trusted colleagues, and together, they began working on a plan. They had no time to waste. The Vorkath fleet was only a few hours away from executing their judgment, whatever that meant. The team scrambled to gather resources, each move shadowed by the knowledge that if they failed, Earth could be lost forever. Julia knew it wasn't just about science. It was about survival. It was about showing the Vorkath that humanity had something they hadn't anticipated: ingenuity and a refusal to submit. Meanwhile, the Vorkath were making their final preparations. They sent out drones and smaller vessels to patrol the skies, scanning Earth for any signs of resistance. Their fleet remained motionless above the cities, casting an oppressive shadow on the world below. But even as they deployed their forces, there was something unsettling about their calm demeanor. The Vorkath were not in a rush. They were not here to destroy. At least, not yet. They were here to test humanity, to see how far they could push before the humans broke. Julia's team worked through the night, building a device that could match the Vorkath's energy output. The first few prototypes failed, each one burning out before they could even deploy. But Julia refused to give up. Every failure brought her closer to understanding the intricacies of the Vorkath's technology. She wasn't just thinking like a scientist. She was thinking like a human being who refused to be cowed by these invaders. Then, in the early hours of the morning, after countless hours of trial and error, the device was ready. It wasn't perfect. It wouldn't destroy the Vorkath ships, but it could disrupt their systems long enough to give Earth a fighting chance. Julia and her team worked with military forces, coordinating with satellites and ground-based systems to deploy the device in strategic locations. The moment of truth arrived. The device was activated, sending out a powerful pulse toward the alien fleet. The world held its breath as the pulse reached its target. For a moment, nothing happened. But then, the Vorkath ships began to flicker. Their sleek, intimidating forms seemed to shimmer, and for a split second, they wavered in the sky. Something had worked. The Vorkath, for the first time since their arrival, seemed uncertain. They had underestimated humanity's ingenuity. But the Vorkath were not easily deterred. They quickly regained control of their systems, and soon, the ships were fully operational once again. However, the brief window of disruption had given humanity something priceless: hope. It was clear now that the Vorkath were not invincible. They could be challenged. And with that knowledge, humanity's resistance began to take shape. As the Vorkath reasserted their dominance, the rest of the world began to unite. No longer were they a collection of divided nations. Earth had one enemy, and for the first time in history, they were ready to fight back. The choice had been made. Humanity would not bow. They would stand tall. The galaxy had underestimated them. The Vorkath had underestimated them. And now, the battle for Earth had truly begun. 3. ChatGPT said, "The night sky above Earth was no longer the peaceful canvas it once was. The massive Vorkath fleet loomed like a swarm of ominous black shadows, blocking out the stars and casting a cold pall over the cities below. The whole world was on edge, a pressure hanging in the air as humanity awaited the next move. The Vorkath had made their intentions clear. Judgment was coming. But there was still no sign of what that judgment would entail. Would they strike down humanity immediately? Or were they toying with Earth, testing its resolve before delivering their final sentence? The fear that had gripped the planet began to shift into something else, something far more dangerous. As Earth's leaders met in their command centers, the message was clear. Humanity had only one choice now: to fight or perish. Every nation, every group of resistance fighters, had been forced to put aside their differences. The Vorkath weren't just enemies of one nation or another. They were enemies of Earth itself. The battle would have to be fought as one. As the days passed, the world's military forces assembled. The countermeasures developed by scientists like Julia Voss had bought them some time, but the Vorkath would not be fooled again. This was not a fight humanity could win by brute force alone. The Vorkath had mastered technology beyond comprehension, their fleet operating with a precision and efficiency that left Earth's weapons systems almost useless. But they had also made one critical mistake: they underestimated humanity's adaptability. Julia had spent countless hours in the lab, fine-tuning the device that had disrupted the Vorkath's control over their fleet. She knew it wasn't enough to rely on just one plan. Humanity needed to get creative if they were to stand any chance. The aliens' dominance over Earth's technology was a severe disadvantage, but if they could disrupt that dominance on multiple fronts, they might just have a chance to turn the tide. With the help of the world's brightest minds, Julia developed a new strategy. This one was less about brute force and more about infiltration, using Earth's existing technology to its advantage. The Vorkath, for all their might, were still alien to Earth's systems. Human ingenuity, combined with knowledge of the planet's vast communications network, could be the key to breaking through their defenses. A series of small, unassuming drones equipped with miniature versions of Julia's disruptor device would be launched from hidden bases around the world. Their job would not be to destroy, but to infiltrate and confuse. The hope was simple: create enough confusion among the Vorkath to give Earth's forces a fighting chance. The drones would enter the Vorkath ship's communication systems, triggering false signals and confusing their operational orders. They might not be able to defeat the Vorkath directly, but they could prevent them from acting in unison, potentially causing delays and disorder within the fleet. As the plan took shape, the global defense forces began their final preparations. Earth's skies were filled with fighter jets and bombers, and military stations buzzed with activity. Every person on Earth who had access to the defense systems was on alert. For the first time, it didn't matter where you were from or what flag you flew. Everyone was working together, unified by the singular goal of protecting their home. The day of the counterattack came quickly. Julia stood among her team, watching the monitors intently as the final checks were made. The drones, tiny but powerful, were ready for launch. She could feel her heart racing, her palms sweating. This was humanity's last hope, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. The Vorkath had arrived with such overwhelming power, and yet, here they were, using Earth's own ingenuity to turn the tables. It was both thrilling and terrifying. As the drones were released into the air, the world held its breath. They moved in silence, invisible to the naked eye, as they slipped through the cracks in Earth's atmosphere and into space. The operation was underway. The drones began their journey toward the Vorkath fleet, weaving through space with a precision that would have been impossible without the careful planning of human minds. It was a race against time. The Vorkath fleet, still hovering ominously over Earth, was poised to make its move, but the drones were faster, more agile. They'd moved into position without detection. Within moments, the first wave of drones infiltrated the Vorkath fleet's communication network. At first, everything seemed to go according to plan. The Vorkath ships began to flicker as the disruption signals triggered false alarms and confusing data. Commanders aboard the Vorkath ships began to issue conflicting orders, sending their forces into disarray. The fleet, once so perfectly synchronized, began to falter. Then, a break. Earth's ground forces launched their first assault. Fighter jets soared into the air, armed with the last of Earth's ammunition. The ground shook as missiles were fired, though they had no illusion that they would be able to destroy the Vorkath fleet. The goal was to cause more confusion, to keep the Vorkath guessing, to make them believe that Earth's military forces had greater resources than they actually did. Every missile launched, every jet in the air was a calculated gamble. On the ground, civilians watched the chaos unfold. They too had learned to be resourceful in these trying times. It wasn't just the military on the front lines now. Every corner of the planet had become a battlefield. People took to the streets in defense of their homes, their families, and their future. Many had nothing but makeshift weapons, but that didn't matter. They weren't going to let Earth fall without a fight. The Vorkath fleet, still disoriented from the drone's interference, began to struggle with their countermeasures. In the confusion, they couldn't pinpoint the source of the disruption. The global defense systems continued to send false signals, and Earth's military began to press the advantage. The Vorkath had clearly expected humanity to cower, to surrender at the first sign of their superior power. They were wrong. Humanity was far more resilient than they had anticipated. However, this victory was not without cost. Earth's defenses were fragile, and the more the Vorkath fleet struggled to regain control, the more they retaliated. Energy blasts ripped through the atmosphere, causing massive explosions in major cities. Earth's resistance could not stop the Vorkath from fighting back. But what the Vorkath hadn't counted on was the tenacity of humanity. No matter how much destruction the aliens unleashed, humanity remained defiant, adapting quickly and refusing to bow to their invaders. For the first time, the Vorkath fleet seemed uncertain. Their communication channels were overloaded, their ships drifting aimlessly for a brief moment as they tried to recalibrate their systems. That was when the next wave of Earth's attack began, a full-on assault, this time aimed directly at the Vorkath's weak points. Missiles, bombs, and laser blasts rained down on the alien ships, exploiting the very confusion the drones had caused. It wasn't a perfect victory, But it was enough to show the Vorkath that humanity would not be defeated without a fight. The first steps had been taken. Earth was no longer a helpless victim awaiting its fate. The Vorkath had made one huge mistake. They had underestimated humanity. The war had only just begun, but the galaxy would soon learn that the most feared warriors in the universe had met their match in the unlikeliest of places, a planet filled with people who would never give up. The aftermath of the initial clash was an uneasy silence, broken only by the hum of emergency systems and the distant wail of sirens in cities still reeling from the fallout. The Vorkath fleet, though shaken by the unexpected resistance, was far from defeated. Their ships, advanced and seemingly invincible, hovered ominously above the planet, their weapons silent but their presence heavy with the promise of retaliation. Humanity had fought back, but the Vorkath were not creatures who understood surrender. They were relentless, and they would not forget the challenge Earth had just presented. In every corner of the globe, people huddled in fear, trying to comprehend the scope of the situation. The media broadcasted images of the Vorkath fleet hovering above major cities, an unmistakable sign of their dominance. But there was also something else. The Vorkath had underestimated the fighting spirit of Earth. It wasn't just the military that had stood up to them, but civilians too, rallying together in ways no one had ever thought possible. From the engineers and scientists to the farmers and doctors, humanity had found a way to strike back. It was a fight for survival, and everyone had a part to play. Julia Voss, who had ignited the spark of resistance with her groundbreaking device, found herself at the center of the storm. She had spent sleepless nights working on the technology that had momentarily thrown the Vorkath into disarray. But now she faced a new challenge: how to maintain this momentum. The Vorkath had learned from their first mistake. They would be more careful, more calculating from here on out. Humanity's brief victory had given them hope, but also painted a target on their backs. As she sat in a secure command center, surrounded by her team and military advisors, the weight of the world seemed to press down on her shoulders. There were no illusions now. There was no easy escape from this fight. The Vorkath would not stop until they had eradicated what they perceived as a threat. But Julia refused to give in. Earth's momentary success had proven that humanity could think on its feet, could adapt and fight back. And that would be their greatest weapon. In the weeks that followed, Earth's global defense network worked tirelessly to improve their technology and strategies. The disruption device, though effective in its limited form, needed refinement. Julia's team was at the forefront, continuously working to enhance the technology to create a more potent countermeasure against the Vorkath's overwhelming superiority. But progress was slow. The Vorkath were fast learners. Their ships began to counteract the disruptions more efficiently, and the humans were forced to think even further outside the box. Meanwhile, the military forces of Earth continued to prepare for what was undoubtedly coming: a full-scale attack. But there was a problem. Earth's weapons were no match for the Vorkath's advanced technology. The aliens' weapon systems were far more advanced than anything Earth had. But Julia, ever the innovator, suggested an unexpected solution. Instead of focusing purely on trying to overpower the Vorkath, what if they could use the Vorkath's own technology against them? The idea was risky. But then again, everything about this fight had been risky from the start. The Vorkath fleet had been using a specific form of energy that allowed their ships to phase in and out of different dimensions, a way to become nearly invincible against physical attacks. Julia realized that if she could replicate a similar form of energy manipulation on Earth, perhaps they could find a way to exploit a weakness in the Vorkath ships. It wasn't a guarantee of victory, but it was a glimmer of hope. Julia shared her idea with her team, and they worked tirelessly for days, combing through data on the Vorkath technology. They studied every piece of footage and intercepted communication to understand how the alien ships operated. Earth's engineers and scientists were working together as one, pooling their knowledge and resources in a way they had never done before. They weren't just building weapons, they were building an understanding of the enemy. Julia's breakthrough came late one night, when she realized that the key to the Vorkath's dimensional energy was tied to their central cores, massive, powerful reactors located within each ship. If those cores could be disrupted, even temporarily, it could create a massive ripple effect that would disable the entire fleet, or at the very least, render the ships vulnerable to attack. She began drafting a plan to launch an assault on the Vorkath fleet's cores. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be pretty. Earth's forces would need to be extremely precise in their targeting. The goal was not to destroy the fleet outright, but to incapacitate it long enough for the combined forces of humanity to launch a full-scale counterattack. The plan was set into motion quickly. Military forces around the world prepared for what would be the most dangerous operation humanity had ever attempted. Fighter jets, bombers, and ships were armed with the new technology designed by Julia's team. As Earth's forces took their positions, the Vorkath began to prepare for their next phase of domination. They believed the humans would fold under pressure, that Earth's resistance would crumble. They did not realize that humanity's ingenuity had only just begun to take shape. The attack was scheduled to take place at the heart of the Vorkath fleet, where their most heavily defended ships hovered. As the countdown began, every human on Earth watched the skies. Their hearts pounded in their chests, their eyes glued to the screens. The fate of the planet rested on the shoulders of a few brave individuals, and it was impossible to tell whether they would succeed or fail. The first wave of Earth's forces launched into the sky, their ships cloaked in silence as they neared the Vorkath fleet. Every move was calculated, every maneuver done with the utmost precision. The Vorkath did not expect an assault so soon after the initial skirmish. They were still recovering from the earlier disruptions, thinking they had learned enough to crush humanity in the next encounter. Julia's team, working in tandem with the military, activated the new energy disruption technology just as the attack began. The first blasts hit the Vorkath ships, sending shockwaves throughout the fleet. The alien vessels began to flicker and stagger, their advanced technology struggling to maintain control. The core reactors of several ships were destabilized, causing massive bursts of energy that rattled the fleet. For the first time since their arrival, the Vorkath were thrown into disarray. Their powerful ships faltered as the carefully laid plans of their leaders were undone by humanity's ingenuity. It wasn't a full victory, not yet, but it was a clear message. Earth was not a world to be conquered so easily. The battle raged on, but the Vorkath had made a critical error. They had underestimated the determination of humanity. The message they had sent was clear: Earth would fight to the end. The stakes had been raised, and the Vorkath were no longer facing a planet on the brink of collapse. They were facing a force of resistance unlike anything they had encountered before. The galaxy's most feared warriors had met humanity, and for the first time, they were uncertain. The battle raged for days, and as the Vorkath fleet began to recover from the unexpected assault, it became clear that humanity's ingenuity and resilience had not only slowed their advance, but had also pushed the invaders into a state of cautious retreat. Despite their overwhelming technological superiority, the Vorkath were faced with an unprecedented challenge, an enemy that refused to break. For the first time since their arrival, the alien invaders found themselves questioning their assumptions about humanity. Julia Voss, now at the heart of Earth's unified military command, watched the footage of the skirmishes from her command center. The alien ships, once confident and unyielding, now seemed erratic. Their previously synchronized maneuvers had turned into disorganized actions as they struggled to adjust to the disruption in their systems. Despite the damage their fleet had sustained, the Vorkath were not yet ready to retreat completely. They had underestimated humanity once before, but they would not make the same mistake again. Humanity, however, had no intention of letting up. The early days of fear and uncertainty had given way to a new sense of purpose. People all over the world were no longer simply waiting for a miracle. They were actively fighting back. Soldiers, engineers, scientists, and ordinary civilians worked in tandem, creating new technologies and refining old ones to give their forces every possible advantage. The world was united in a way it had never been before. Every nation, every group, every individual had a role to play in this battle for survival. As Earth's forces regrouped and rearmed, Julia's team continued to refine the energy disruption technology, focusing on perfecting the system that had been so effective in throwing the Vorketh fleet into disarray. The new iteration would target not only their communication systems, but also the vital components of their energy cores, giving Earth's forces a real chance to disable the fleet on a larger scale. It was a dangerous game, but humanity had no choice. It was either adapt or perish. Julia's heart raced as she watched the data streams flood her screens, indicating that the disruption devices were functioning better than ever. The Vorketh, now on the defensive, were beginning to look for weaknesses in their own systems, trying to regain control over the malfunctioning ships. Julia knew that time was of the essence. Earth's military forces were already preparing for another assault. If they waited too long, the Vorketh would recover and counterattack with renewed ferocity. The next stage of the plan was a risky one, an all-out assault on the core of the Vorketh fleet, the very heart of their operation. Earth's forces had spent weeks planning and calculating the exact locations where the disruption technology would have the greatest impact. If they could disable the Vorketh command ships, they could break the fleet's coordination and send the entire invasion force into chaos. Julia knew that this would be the most dangerous phase of the operation. The Vorketh were prepared for resistance, and they would not make the same mistake twice. The countdown began. Across the globe, soldiers and civilians alike prepared for what would be the final showdown. Humanity's last stand was upon them, and there was no turning back. Julia stood at the helm of the operation, her fingers dancing across the controls as she coordinated the release of the disruptor drones. The energy pulses would be timed with precision to strike at the very heart of the Vorketh fleet. If it worked, it could disable their ability to retaliate, at least long enough to give Earth's forces a chance to secure victory. With a sudden burst of movement, Earth's forces surged forward. Ships flew into the fray, their weapons charged with the latest technology designed to overwhelm the Vorketh's defenses. The Vorketh fleet responded quickly, their ships firing off devastating energy blasts at Earth's forces. But this time, the battle was different. The disruption technology worked faster and more efficiently, targeting the Vorketh's communication systems and energy cores with pinpoint accuracy. For the first time, Earth's forces saw an opening. The Vorketh ships began to waver, their command ships temporarily losing power. With their central control disrupted, the once unified fleet splintered into chaotic factions. The Vorketh were no longer the well-oiled machine they had once been, and Earth's forces took advantage of every moment of vulnerability. Missiles and energy blasts rained down upon the alien fleet, targeting key vessels that had once been considered nearly indestructible. But the Vorketh were not defeated yet. Despite the chaos, their fleet remained formidable. The alien warriors had a tenacity that matched humanity's, and they were not about to give up without a fight. Vorketh ships began to regroup, reorganizing their forces in an attempt to launch a counterattack. However, Earth's forces, emboldened by their unexpected success, pressed forward with relentless determination. The skies were filled with explosions, the air vibrating with the intensity of the battle. Every moment was crucial, every decision a matter of life and death. In the midst of the chaos, Julia realized something that both thrilled and terrified her. Humanity was not merely fighting to survive. They were evolving. The resistance had become more than just a defense mechanism. It was a movement, an ideology, a force that transcended borders, backgrounds, and beliefs. The fight was no longer just about repelling an invasion. It was about proving to the galaxy that humanity was not a species to be dismissed or destroyed. They were fighters, survivors, and innovators, and the Vorketh would soon learn that underestimating them was a fatal mistake. But victory was not yet in reach. The Vorketh, despite their setbacks, still had the capacity to retaliate with devastating force. Their warships were repairing themselves, and their tactics were shifting in response to Earth's new offensive. The war was far from over, and the final outcome was still uncertain. What was clear, however, was that humanity had made its mark. The galaxy's most feared warriors had met a force they had not anticipated, a planet of people who would never give up. The battle continued, but as Earth's forces held their ground, it was clear that the invaders were no longer certain of their victory. The Vorkath had underestimated humanity's strength, creativity, and resolve. Now they would face the consequences of that mistake. The war was far from over, but humanity had found its voice, and the galaxy would never forget it.